Hello, and welcome to the Resilient Leader's Journey, a podcast where we navigate challenging currents of growth and change. My name is Trent Theroux. If you're enjoying these episodes, please subscribe. Let somebody know about it so they can join in and get all this leadership knowledge as well. You can find us on YouTube, LinkedIn, by audio on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get them. My guest today, he's sitting right over there, is the managing director of Cambier Consulting. Cambier is a management consulting firm that advises the market research and market services industries. He is also the author of For the People, a citizen's manifesto to shaping our nation's future, and he has a master's degree from the University of Oxford in philosophy, politics, and economics.
Yeah.
Simon Chadwick, how are you today?
I'm great, thank you. How are you doing, Trent?
I have never felt better. Thank you for asking. The pressing question I have is getting a master's degree in philosophy, politics, and economics. When you're making a decision, do you overthink it, debate it, or just follow the money?
Well, that's a great question. I usually debate it with a splash of following the money.
Okay, something I'm sure you learned very well at Oxford.
Well, what Oxford allowed you to do and taught you to do, which I think was the best thing it ever did, for me certainly, was how to think. And it doesn't really care about what knowledge well, it does care about the knowledge, but it's about how you think through that and your ability then to argue it.
And so how has that helped you in your career to have that type of background?
I think it enabled me from an early age, and certainly as I got higher and higher in my career, to know when I was needing to step back and think, when I needed to act, when I needed to deploy empathy, when I needed to be more sort of persuasive. And before I became a consultant, I was global CEO of a major company, and our owners were somewhat, shall we say, interesting. And there were a number of times when one had to work out when to actually step in and say stuff, when to back off, when to think around things. So that's really where it helped.
Sure. I'm assuming you were in your 20s when you got your master's degree, and some of these are lessons you're talking about are pretty heady, and they normally take a couple of decades to see through. Have your mindsets changed about empathy and the like from when you were in your 20s to now you're, well, we'll say not in your 20s?
Actually, not really. I was very lucky in as much as I joined a company where they had this wonderful idea that, they would train you and then they would consistently promote you just beyond what they thought you could do. And, they were constantly pushing you. I found myself in Milan as the CEO of their company in Italy at the age of 29 when I didn't speak Italian. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And I had to really turn this company around really fast. And that's when you learn, that's when empathy actually did come in. Empathy on the one hand and decision-making ability on the other. It's a sort of putting them together is where where you actually begin to understand whether the path that you're following is the right path.
I understand. Putting people into a job they may not be ready for sounds a lot like when my mother used to buy my shoes as a child. She'd buy them a little big because
Yeah.
she knew I grew into them.
Yep, exactly.
Is that a successful formula in your mind that somebody should be a little underqualified? Or do you expect that people should be adequately or sometimes overqualified for a position?
So when I took that philosophy on, I have to say, and it's really about your belief in that person. And it's about not only your belief, but your ability to communicate your confidence in that person. So you are pretty sure they've got the ability to get there, but you're going to help them. They know you're going to help them, and they know you're going to keep their feet to the fire. And so, in that sense, I always used to go for people who I knew eventually could do the things that I wanted them to do. I feel putting people who are overqualified into a position is a recipe for getting.
Can I assume when you were the CEO in Milan that you were the best dressed CEO there? Most fashionable?
I was in Milan, so I learned how to be well dressed.
I see.
My wife, who met me after I came back from Milan, met her in New York, and I was wearing an Italian suit and an Italian coat, and she thought I was very well dressed and far richer than I actually was.
You look smart enough for her, both intellectually and professionally. How wonderful. Can you tell us a little about what Cambiar Consulting is and how you serve the marketing community?
Yeah, so Cambiar Consulting is a change management consulting company that I founded with a colleague after a long career. I was CEO of a number of companies. He had been CEO of a number of companies, and we realized, this is back in 2004, we realized that change was happening very, very rapidly, particularly in the industries that we were used to, which was marketing research, but I'd put it more widely than that. It's more the insights industry or the insights function. And it seems kind of cute now. In 2004, things were changing fast. It's nothing compared to today. But we started out by really saying, okay, a lot of CEOs just don't know. They're being overwhelmed by change. They don't know how to handle change. And so that we had no research of our own to base this on. We just had a hunch and we launched. And it turned out we were right, which thankfully, that was 20 plus years ago. But what we do these days, it's been interesting. We've developed along with the market, along with the industry. The industry has grown, the insights industry, which is research of many different types, data analytics, digital data analytics, all of those sorts of things, has grown significantly. It's a $150 billion industry. And we're advising not only the CEOs of supply companies, those who are digital data analytics companies or research companies, but also those in major corporations who are the buyers of those services and the advisors internally, the consultants internally to their C-suites. And so we put these two together, if you like, and we're doing mainly things like strategic consulting, strategy, but also team building, where we bring people together and then train them how to work together and how to become consultants in their own right. And we do a lot of education. Those are the main things we did.
We got to meet last year an event for the Insights Association of North America. You were the keynote speaker, and this is a little bit about what you were speaking. But my audience may not know what CX means, what the data behind this marketing means. It was very interesting to me to watch an example based on candy. Now, maybe because the speaker was passing out candy at the same time in the middle of the day, but she was expressing the data behind flavors and trying to gather enough information to bring back to their design team. That's what your firm is trying to help people understand, what data is going to drive their decisions?
In a way, they are probably more expert in actually how to do that. So, for example, there are many different ways in which this type of inquiry is used. So you talked about CX, which is customer experience. There's customer insights, there's user experience, all sorts of angles to this. But the question that we're dealing with all the time is, okay, we got all this data. How do we fashion this data into a story, which we can then take to decision makers so that they will act on it? So how do we influence them and persuade them to act on it? And how do we prove the benefit that they're getting out of it? What is the return on investment? Something, might interest you. What would you say is a really good return on investment?
Well, I always looked at hurdle rates for capital equipment.
Okay.
So I had to be in the north of 18% IRR.
Okay. Yep.
So that's where I was. My baseline was I had put in a decent level of cost of capital. So that kind of I'm kind of tipping the scales a little bit on that.
Yeah.
But that's what I
I
would say.
understand. Yeah. No, I understand. I think that's very very logical. The average return on investment of insights that are acted upon is about 400%.
Shut up! Wow, 400%.
Hmm.
So how does take me to investment if you could take me to investment to payoff.
Okay, so and actually that particular equation isn't even based on what the insights cost. It's based on what was status quo ante. So
Okay.
status quo ante to status quo afterwards. Basically, let me give you an example. This is a really good example that I actually love. One of our clients it was a pharmaceutical client. They were looking at the potential for a new drug, and they were doing huge amounts of studies amongst physicians, amongst patients, and so on as to whether this drug, how could they launch it? What was the volume likely to be? How fast was it going to achieve that volume? All of these things. And the more that this particular researcher looked at the data, all the data that had been, and they'd spent about 300,000 on collecting this data, and the more they just realized it wasn't going to work. Now, to build the factory to produce that drug was $15 million. They basically said to those in power, do not go ahead with this. Do not build this factory. Okay? So they didn't. They canned it. 15 million saved. 3 weeks later, she was in the same division of the company, and she said, I need another 100,000 to do another study. And they said, oh, that's not in the budget. And the vice president said, she just saved us $15 million. Give her the money. So, that's how there are many, many ways of actually measuring the ROI. But
I
essentially
see.
what you're doing is you're saying, okay, what would have happened if we had not done this, or if the status quo had remained as it was, and what has actually happened. And one of the things that people say is, well, I can't do that because, so many other people are involved in these decisions. And what we say is, look, credit is not something you slice up. Credit, everybody can claim the credit for its success. And you can claim that credit if it was based on your data, was based on what you said, on how you consulted with your management. You can claim that data, that credit.
That's an excellent point. That credit is an entity that can get shared by many and not sliced like a cherry pie for you to take home some later. It doesn't work that way.
Doesn't.
But the concept you're working with a little bit here is, and I can understand a manager said, sunk cost. I spent that 300,000 already. That 300,000 is a whole different decision point, correct?
Mm-hmm.
The next decision point's 100,000. And it's hard for managers to accept that it's a brand new decision point. That was the other decision one. Here's the new one. Is that what you find
I think
as well?
I think that's true. I think also that can lead to decision making in a box. I think this is why we're so strong on making sure that companies actually do consistently measure the return on investment, because you're basically going out there. Let me back up a little bit. We did a huge study about 2-3 years ago on what we call insights maturity. How strategic is the insights function within any big company? And what we found was that there were all sorts of things which added to insights maturity, but the one single thing that really, really, really made for a realization of the degree to which it was strategically helpful was that the function was consistently communicating proof of value right across the organization. So, if we were if we did a study and it actually, or a whole bunch of studies, and they led to this amazing product being launched very successfully, we make sure everybody knows about it. And that's what you have to do so that decision in a box doesn't happen. What you really are looking to happen is for people to say, hell, I need these people. I need this function on my side. Yeah, I'll give them 100,000.
It's easy to overlook the non-revenue producing, to look at
Mm-hmm.
it as a cost center rather than a profit center. That's
So
what you're
much
describing.
so much so that, when we're talking to leaders of consumer insight functions, we say to them, look, yeah, it's all very well that you've got a champion in the CMO or the CIO, but the one you've got to get on your side, really on your side, is the CFO, because you've got to get out of the P&L where you're a cost item, and you've got to get onto the balance sheet as an asset. Once you're on the balance sheet as an asset, then the world is your oyster.
As a former CFO of a $250 million energy services company, I wholeheartedly agree with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
I was the gatekeeper, and it came to the story somebody told me. Here's why. Here's how it's going to affect us. It's not necessarily going to gain the revenue, but it could be also on a cost avoidance measure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And you're right, it is about the story.
it is about the story.
Storytelling is absolutely fundamental.
Agree. What do the budgets look like at the insights level? Is it a function of revenue? Is it a function of headcount and size? How do they determine a function of that for?
Yeah, that's a great question because it keeps on changing, and it can depend very heavily on what the economic circumstances are like right now. For example, with AI coming into the equation, a lot of CEOs are going, well, what do we need all these people for? AI can do it, which, by the way, 2 years from now, they'll discover to their angst that it doesn't. But so then it becomes based on headcount. Those companies that are perhaps that much more in tune with how much, you know, companies like Mondelez, for example, really, really, really understand research.
Sure.
Then you may well be looking at a percentage of revenue. I think where a lot of it is concerned, it's not so much how much, it's what it's used for. So in those companies where it's more of a sort of CMO function, a line item function on the P&L, you might find maybe 70-80% of it is being used for rear view mirror stuff. How's our brand been performing? Did we do well on this advertising? All of that stuff. Whereas you really should be spending that proportion on future stuff, strategic stuff, that is going, okay, what can we do now that is going to increase revenue or reduce cost or whatever it may be? So it's really about, okay, here's the part, but what are we going to use it for? Because that's going to then ROI.
Part of my responsibilities, I managed my IT group, and I said I want to look at that budget in terms of three components: run, grow, transform.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
that was the run portion. Hey, let's just do the blocking and tackling and a little bit of the rear view. But we wanted a meaningful component to transform to say, what does the business look like in 5 years? And how do we get, what's the gain in the gap there that we
Mm-hmm.
have to work within?
Very much so. Very much so. That's exactly where we come from. It's you're going to. Yeah, I had a colleague once, I think he was at General Mills, and they were famous for starting up their own research companies. Unilever used to do the same thing as well. And I asked him once, why do you keep doing this? There are plenty of research companies out there. And he said, well, if I have an issue, or I'm thinking about a future state, and I go out to one of the big research companies, and I say, solve this for me, they'll pull something down off the shelf. And I know that if I've got that issue, my competitors have got that issue too, and they're going to the same people, and they're going to be pulling it down off the shelf. I don't get any competitive advantage. So one of the things that you've got to be thinking about is, how am I going to get competitive advantage out of what I'm doing here? And that's really, really difficult to do.
Certainly imagine. And how interesting. I mean, that just keeps reinventing themselves in a way.
Yeah, yeah, it's very true.
Wonderful. Your book, For the People, A Citizen's Manifesto to Shaping the Nation's Future, is that book more in need now than ever?
Yeah. Um, it's funny. People say, "Hey, you predicted all of this 5 years ago," and it's true. There's a background to this trend. I mean, yes, I have a degree in politics and economics, but my family, I was born in South Africa by mistake, but born in South Africa. My parents were missionaries there, and or in Southern Africa. And my father eventually he became the Bishop of Kimberley and Kuruman, which is the whole of northwest South Africa, right in the middle of the whole bunch of things that were going on in the 80s.
Right.
Regarding apartheid. And I grew up in an environment that it was an autocracy. It was, I don't want to use the F word, the fascist word, but it was fascism, and our phone was bugged, our house was bugged, we were followed everywhere. The secret police, who weren't that terribly smart, had a car outside our gates 24/7. My mother, being British, used to take them a cup of tea every morning just to say, "We know you're
Perfect
here.
manners.
We know you're here." And so I've experienced what I've seen. I've seen a lot of what's happening now here and elsewhere is a movement in that direction. And so when I wrote the book, which was published in 2001, just as the pandemic had occurred, I was really trying to say, look, what is government about? Why do we have government? How does it relate back to to the Constitution, one of the most amazing documents written in history? What are we looking for? And I was trying to do so in a different way, and I actually did so through looking at everything through uh, the lens of Maslow's hierarchy.
Okay.
And what's the basics? What then, as you become more and more and more
Actualization at the top.
actualization and all of that. And I said, and then I looked out around the world as to all those countries that were actually enabling their populations to achieve actualization. What were they doing? And so it's interesting. It got onto the bestseller list for a nanosecond. And now the sales are coming back up. And I'm not doing any sort of promotion of it or anything like that, but it's the sales are just coming back up.
Well, maybe when this broadcasts, it'll get right back up to the New York Times list.
Oh, well, who knows?
Simon, I have one last question to ask you. Who is your favorite fictional character?
Wow. Yeah. I think it would have to be Paddington Bear.
Interesting. Why Paddington Bear?
Because he's so wise and so empathetic whilst appearing to be the opposite.
Interesting. Interesting. Is that similar to the way you are?
No, I don't think I would call myself as wise as he is.
All right, all right.
But
you wear a raincoat and a hat and stay in train stations?
and keep keep a marmalade sandwich under my hat.
Yeah. Well, Simon Chadwick, it has been a pleasure to have you join us today. Thank you very much for your time.
My pleasure. And it's been lovely talking to you, Trent.
Folks, resilient leaders face challenging currents. It's tough navigating, but with one tack or another, we can get there together. Again, if you enjoy this podcast, go ahead, subscribe. That way you can see them when they come out every week. Once again, a big thank you to our guest today, Simon Chadwick. I hope everyone has a great week. Be well. See you next time.